Welcome to the Worth Listening podcast, where we focus on having positive and productive conversations around money. I'm your host, Lauryn, a 4-time Olympian and certified financial planner. On this show, my guests share their money stories. Everyone has a unique story and experiences both wins and losses when it comes to money. My intent is to give listeners something they can relate to, something that builds their courage to be open and take control of their own money story. When I'm not creating a great show for my listeners, I'm running my company, Worth Winning, where I help individuals and families organize their finances. Check us out at worth-winning.com. All right, now on with the show. Hey, good people. So far, this is my favorite episode in our Moms and Money series. I'm always saying how I believe travel can open your eyes to a bigger world. For Linda, that moment came during a summer trip to Spain, an experience that sparked a lifelong love of travel and a deep curiosity about how people live, connect, and build community across borders. Oh my goodness, she's amazing. So from sailing around the globe by ship to teaching abroad for a year in Korea, Linda has built a life that is rich with stories, which you're going to see today, courage and connection, while checking out 65 countries along the way. Linda, I'm happy to say, is now here in Medellin, Colombia with her spouse and twin boys, and I am so grateful that I have crossed paths with her. She has taught me the power of community, what it means to feel truly supported, and she has helped me redefine family as the people who show up, make space for you to rest, and to focus on what really matters. But what stands out to me about her story isn't just where she's been, it's how she's built a sense of home wherever she goes. This is the story of my newest bestie, Linda Tay, traveler, teacher, community builder, and living proof that the world feels just a little bit smaller and a lot kinder when we simply prioritize care for one another. Let's listen to her money memoir. Linda, welcome to the show today. I'm so happy to have you. I just told everyone a little bit about why I'm excited about this episode, but we're just going to get into getting to know you a little bit. So why don't we just start from the beginning? Tell us where Linda came from and your just basic introduction.
Okay. So my name's Linda. As you know, I am a mom of twin boys who just turned 9. I'm married to an Italian-Syrian husband. And I am from an immigrant family. My parents were refugees from Cambodia. They moved to the U.S. in the 80s, had my brother, my sister, and then me. We were all born and raised in Denver, Colorado. I think my parents' background really did have an impact and continues to have an impact on the way we live our lives, the way I live my life especially, and the way I feel about money, because they came from very little. They both were educated at the university level, and then a genocide happened in their country. So they had to leave and lived a good chunk of their lives in a refugee camp. And then they were sponsored to the US. So I think that really kind of sets up how they felt about education being the pathway to getting us out of poverty, getting them out of the situations that they were in, and just saving a lot, I guess, just always having an emergency fund because you never know what can happen.
Wow, you just said a lot. You came out swinging. So from your parents having to flee to being in a refugee camp, being college educated, I've heard similar stories of, a life where you were creating something that we would probably consider middle class in another country to then having to up and leave kind of unexpectedly and then start over in a new place. Was it hard for them to start over when they got to America? Were they able to use the education that they had, or did they have to change jobs completely? What did that look like? What did your parents do once they got to America?
Yeah, great question. So my mom had just finished a university degree. She was an only child, but from a very rural family, a fairly poor family. So she was the first in her family to even be educated. My grandmother did not go to school. She taught herself to read, but my mom had a very different life. I don't know. I wouldn't say that they reached middle class per se, but I think because she did get a higher education, she was on her way to that. But because she was in her early 20s when everything happened, I think all of that got cut short. My dad, for example, was in law school when it happened. And I think he was like interning or working in a ministry of some kind when the city got cleared out, because that's what happened at the start of the Civil War. And when they went to the US, they had no English language skills. They spoke French because it was a French protectorate for a time, so they had to learn French in school. And none of their education transferred. They didn't have any of their documents. They didn't even have birth certificates with them. So they were just like completely undocumented in every form of the word. So both of my parents did go to a community college. They went to night school. They had us pretty early on. And so my grandmother went with my mom. My mother's mom did get to flee with her. And so she was able to take care of the kids while my parents went to night school after working during the day. And my dad earned an associate's degree in electronics and my mom in accounting. They did not end up using those degrees. And, eventually it reached a point where like an associate's degree wasn't going to get them very far, but they did have pretty stable jobs. My mom worked for the state of Colorado in like a quality assurance department for pretty much her whole career. They started off both in like assembly work and kind of more what we consider like blue collar work. My dad continued in that. So I always think like he didn't even have a retirement when he retired. He like lived off of Social Security, and it was kind of a preview, but like a foreshadowing, but they did save money and they did invest in real estate a little bit. And so they live comfortably now, but they definitely started off with very little. My dad, too, came from a very poor farming family. He is one of 5 siblings, and he was the only one who went to school. It was one of those scenarios where if you have multiple kids, you kind of see who has like the most potential to be successful in school, and you gather all your resources and send them away. So my dad went to the nearest city and studied in school there, stayed with relatives and studied in school there. And he did make it far, in education, but none of that really translated once he had to leave.
Jeez Louise, this story is so interesting. Like, I've known you, been getting to know you, but little things that I did not know. So your parents were working while going to school, finished school, went back to work, doing something different, I'd imagine, than what they were doing when they were in school. So it's probably just kind of like the kind of get by kind of work initially. And then it was like, let's transition into something else that is going to be a little bit more long term. How do you remember your childhood as it pertains to money and what you experienced as your parents were, getting themselves on their feet and doing these different things in order to be able to provide for you all?
Yeah, that's a great question. Until I was 3 years old, we lived in like a pretty rough part of Denver. I don't have like great memories. I don't have like really any memories of that. But when I turned 3, so my brother would have been 4 or 5, we did move into the suburbs. They were able to buy a house and move into the suburbs. Of course, this was early 80s, and this isn't something that most of us are able to do now. Cost of housing and all that is different, but they were able to do that. So then we moved into this house. It was my parents, my grandmother, and then my brother and I, and then later my sister came along. So I always felt like we had shelter. There was never a fear that we would lose that. I don't actually know what was going on, if there was ever an instance where, financially they weren't in a stable position, where they were worried about losing housing or anything like that. But I was not aware of that as a kid, so I had comfort in that. I did know that we were not well off in that, like all of our clothes came secondhand. My mom, when she had my sister, was on the WIC program, the Women Infant Child program. So she was able to get resources, to get formula, to get food and stuff like that, which, by the way, is such a great program. I wholly support it and the amazing things that it was able to do for our family and many families. So I know that we had to tap into resources like that, but I don't think I ever felt insecure necessarily. Like we would eat, basic things. Like we would eat a lot of ramen noodles. We would eat a lot of rice and canned sardines, which like to this day is a comfort food of mine. A lot of rice in general, which is like culturally what we do anyway. So it'd be like rice with sardines, rice with eggs, and just more basic stuff. But like I said, it was a pretty like comfortable upbringing.
Yeah, and this is our mom series. So I think one of the things that's standing out to me as I listen to you talk is like how sometimes as parents, you know, we think of what our children are experiencing versus what our children are actually experiencing and what we try to shield our children from, but how they're also sponges and they take in everything. And so it's like you realize that, your clothes were secondhand. You realize that you weren't necessarily rich, but you were also loved and cared for. And like you said, there was a roof overhead, you were fed. I wonder too, like how many, rich people, based on the time, Lisa, there's culture within your household, culture within like the actual culture of which you grew up in. But I'm like the culture of the 80s. Like, I wonder how many people weren't eating ramen noodles in the 80s. Like, even if they were millionaires, which I don't know because that wasn't my upbringing. Like, everybody loved ramen. Now we know it's like bad
Yeah.
and, but,
I think about that now too. I'm like, I survived on this. So like you don't need that much to survive. You don't
right.
need to be
We turned out fine. So
exactly.
but we're also like probably not feeding our kids ramen noodles nowadays even.
Yeah. We learn, we progress.
What about like allowance or chores? Do you remember kind of any things around how you were being taught about money in light of, what your upbringing was and your brothers and your sisters? Like, how do you remember them acting as it relates to like money upbringing?
So we did not get an allowance, but we were expected to do chores in the house. So from when I was really young, we were washing dishes, doing laundry, and that was just an expectation that that's how we contribute to the household. I don't think that I had like a very strong understanding of money, except to know that like if you have it, you save it. You save it until you like absolutely need it. You don't buy like a bunch of, frivolous things, even like toys and things we would get either secondhand or we had neighbors that would give us their toys that they weren't playing with anymore. And then other than that, we like from my childhood memory, I don't think my parents ever bought us like a new toy because to them that was a want and not a need. And probably as a kid, that was hard because, you go to school and they have like new toys and new sneakers and new clothes. And, there's a point in your life where you don't care, you don't notice, and then you do. And then it's hard to like not notice. But my parents really did put a strong emphasis on saving money. And as we got older, we could see like, okay, that's why we were able to, I guess, have this house and we're able to. The other thing too is like my parents, when they left Cambodia in 81, they had been saving since then to go back, to visit. They left behind a lot of family members. And like at the time, my dad, 3 out of his 4 siblings were there. So, and his parents were there. And so that was like a really big expense. And he wanted to go back with his immediate family. So I do know that they saved for things like that. And I think this is something I know I've said to my kids too, is like, we can't just buy everything that we want to buy. And you go to school and you see kids with like all the newest, video games and trading cards and blah, blah, blah. It's not because you can't buy that, but like because your dad and I find experiences and travel to be really important. And we were able to take that trip to Australia because we saved for it. We're able to take that trip to Italy because we saved for it. And so I think that like I've definitely passed that on. And of course I'm in like a different financial situation than my parents were, but I still take the sort of like I'm just not a shopper and hoping that my kids are ingesting that as well.
I think you bring up a really good point about like value-based purchases. The way I usually like to say is like spend with purpose.
Yeah.
And I love it when people organize their finances in such a way that they can say like, okay, this is what's important to me. This is where I want to put my dollars. And this is why it's meaningful to put my dollars here versus, I'm hearing all this noise. I'm hearing all these distractions. The world is telling me consume, consume, consume. And before I know it, I get to the end of the month. I don't have anything to show for what I earned. I feel stressed out about money all the time. And it may be because like you don't have a actual like guiding map for like what it is that you want to use money as a tool to live the, to live this particular life that you want. And it sounds like that's what you've done is like, hey, this is what we have. Instead of spending money on this, we're going to spend money on this because I want you to experience XYZ thing.
And I think it helps too to have a partner who's on the same page as you. I think it would be really difficult if we were opposite in that way. We would probably live a very different life, but we both live outside of our home countries and we're both travelers and we continue to travel. And that's been like a real priority for us in building our family and like making sure those values are still there. So exactly like you said, it's planning for that and then making sure that we're like sticking to that plan.
Yeah, let's talk about that a little bit. So, where did you meet your boo thing? How did you meet your boo thing? Yeah, you mentioned also traveling. So, tell us a little bit about like where you've been. Were you on a trip when you met Bassam? Yeah.
So I think travel has always fascinated me. I didn't do a lot of it as a kid, except for like a couple trips to Cambodia before the end of high school. And then I took a high school trip to Spain. I had had a couple summer jobs and just saved a bunch of money to be able to join that class trip.
What was the first summer job? Like, what was the first thing you ever had to do to earn money?
When I was 14, I worked at a Chinese restaurant called Wong's Inn, and I made probably $3 an hour. And it wasn't like a waitressing job where you get tips. I was a boss girl, so I didn't get tips. Like the waitress got tips, and I just like cleared the table and brought drinks. But $3 an hour when you were making nothing actually did kind of like add up.
And at 14, yeah, and cost of living, inflation, like.
Yeah. You're not like nobody's going to hire you at 14. So this was all, under the table stuff. But it felt exciting to have like spending money. So I saved towards that trip that was coming in like 2 years. And when I was 15, so when I was 14, the summer job I did in between school. And then when I was 15, I worked at Sonic Drive-In. I don't know if you have that where you are from, but
they've got the best crushed ice, right?
They have such good drinks. Yes. So I worked there at 15. They hired me knowing that I was 15. And then one day, like probably 3 months into my job, somebody came in from like the regional office and like asked me how old I was. And I told them because, they had hired me and he let me go because he said we're not allowed to employ you. So that sucked. But I got 3 months in there and that was pretty good. That was maybe like a $5 an hour job, which was a step up.
Upgrade, right?
And back then, Sonic, a lot of people paid with cash. And so they would actually leave a tip. So I felt like that was an exciting job. And then after that, I worked in the mall. When I turned 16, I worked at the Limited 2, like the children's clothing store in the mall. So I've always had like summer jobs in high school. And I went on this trip to Spain. It was like a 10-day trip with my Spanish class. And I was like, this is amazing. Like there's just so much world out there. And I'm from like the suburbs of Denver. So, real suburbia, like Applebee's and just, not that exciting. So it was fine. It was like a great upbringing and all. But that trip like really excited me. Also, my trips to Cambodia were really cool too. And also really humbling because I realized like my parents ended up in the US by pure chance. It really was like a lottery system to see who would get sponsored to the US and who wouldn't. And like my dad did, but his brothers didn't. And his sister didn't. And his parents didn't. But my mom and her mom did. And none of the rest of their family did. And so the fact that I was born in the US and had the life that I had and the passport that I had is truly so random and such a privilege. And I think those first trips to Cambodia made me realize like I am so lucky and like it would be wasteful to not take advantage of like this ability to travel that I have. Because, with a US passport, you can go to so many places. And with all the moving that we've done, I know like if it doesn't work out, I can always go back. I can always leave. And most of the world does not have that privilege. And most of the world, I mean, a lot of people like risk their lives for that kind of life and that kind of privilege. And so just having that realization, I felt like, there's just so much out there.
It's not something that we can take for granted. You are 100% right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's exactly it. So, and then in college, I studied abroad twice. I did one summer semester in Mexico. And then my final semester, my senior year, I did semester at sea, where we traveled by ship around the world. And that was really cool. So I think from then on, I was like, I want to live abroad. At the time, I was like, for a period, like maybe I'll do a year abroad at some point when my like life allows it. So when I graduated, I did Teach for America. So I taught for 3 years in Phoenix. And in my third year, I thought like if I don't leave now, I'm going to get really comfortable and I might just stay. And then like 1 year is going to turn into two, two's going to turn into three. So I'm just going to leave. Like I'm loving my job. I'm loving everything I'm doing, but like it feels like this is the chance to go. I know most people leave like in distress when they're like, I'm just done with this place. But you know, like Obama had just been elected. It was like a more positive time in history. But I felt like, okay, I'm at a point where I can go. So my first time living, like actually living abroad, was in Korea. I taught English in Korea for a year. And then after that year stint, I took a year off and just traveled with, like I earned money for that year and then basically spent it all in the next year traveling. And then I went to Cambodia and I taught there for 2 years. And at the end of those 2 years, I went to Dubai, heard about teaching opportunities there that were really good. I had a friend who was living outside of Dubai, but she was like, you know, like life here is really good. In Cambodia, I really loved my job, but I really wasn't earning very much. I did it more for the experience, but she was saying like, you know, if you want to save money, like this is the place to be. So I went to Dubai. I met my now husband. We both, in our first year living there, were like, why are we here? Like, we don't belong here. There are like lots of pros and cons to living in Dubai.
What was he doing there?
He was working too. And he had also had a life of just hopping around. He had lived in India for a year. He just had this like spark where he's like, I want to learn how to play West African drums. So he went and lived in Burkina Faso for 3 months. Like we just had literally sort of women lives where we're like, do this, so where'd go? And we, you know, prior to meeting each other. And there weren't many people like us in Dubai. A lot of people were very, you know, work focused. They were there to save money, which is kind of like what brought us there. But as far as like mindsets go, we were pretty different. Like people were flashy, like in general, like you make money and you show off your money. And that didn't really fit us. And so when we met each other, it was like a breath of fresh air and we both quit our jobs and left. We bought a van in Germany and traveled around Europe for about 8 months.
Wait, so where is your husband from?
So he is from Italy. His parents are Syrian. His dad had moved to Italy when he was 18 to study medicine. And he had stayed there. And like his mom is from Syria. He went back to Syria, married her, brought her to Italy. And they were in this small Italian town in the north where they were the only immigrants there. So my husband had like a really similar story. Financially, he grew up really different than I did, but as far as being like the outsiders in a town where people are not used to outsiders, we had that in common, and I think that really connected us. Plus all our travels, and when we were living in this van in Europe, we had talked about like what it would look like if we were to ever have kids. And at the time, I didn't think I would ever want kids because it didn't fit with like the lifestyle that I wanted to live, which is one of being like selfish and free and spontaneous. But my husband did. He like had always wanted to have kids. In retrospect, I don't think he really understood the magnitude of having children. And maybe it was more of like it just seems like a fun idea. He's a great father, but it was probably more like young, idealistic dreams of what it's like to be a parent. So anyway, we just started talking about things that are important to us, that we would want to continue moving around, that we would want to continue living in other countries, exposing them to different cultures, different languages. And I think that might have been the first time where I was like, I think I could see having children with this person because we are on the same page. Whereas, people that I had dated in the past, I think they knew that I enjoyed travel, but they were hoping, if I got married and had kids, that I would like settle down, which was not in the cards for me at all. So at the end of that van trip, we found out we were pregnant.
Surprise! Wait.
So I was like, oh, well, we talked about it. We talked about like maybe starting to try like once we landed somewhere, but we were still living in a van. So, and at this point had not worked in like 8 months.
I mean, now you guys get like why I was so excited to have Linda on the podcast. Like Cambodian American, a Serbian Italian that
Syrian, yeah.
met up, Syrian Italian that met up in Dubai, then decided to live in a van in Germany.
Yeah.
Like, yeah, now there's kids in the picture. Like, hey, maybe we should do this. I don't really know. Okay, also we're pregnant, and there's two of them. Like,
yes, we did not find out there were two of them until a little while later. So it was truly like one shock after another. But yes, once I realized, I think I realized I was pregnant pretty early on because my body did change pretty quickly. And at this point, we were coming towards the end of our van trip anyway. We were talking about places we could go next. I had a lead to a teaching job in Ghana. So that was like high on my list. That fell through though. And so we were kind of like, well, what now? Like the world's our oyster.
was teaching your passion? Like you mentioned, like you said, you did Teach for America is kind of like where it started out from a work perspective. And then you started kind of teaching all over the world. I know a lot of people use teaching, like it's like easy to speak. I mean, to teach English in other places and people use that to be able to travel. Was that kind of like your motivation or was it like you had passion around teaching when you started out?
Yeah, I would say that's a really good question. I would say it started as a passion. Like in college, I had like a social studies class that was focused on education. And I was really fascinated by the inequality of education in the US. So I think that's what triggered it for me was like, why is our education system so bad in some places and so good in some places? And why, like, with the wealth of our country, can we not provide high quality education for everybody? That persists to this day. You know, there's like still so many issues with the way education is. I don't have the answers, but I wanted to be involved in that. So to me, it felt like a movement that I did feel really passionate about. And because I had got my master's in teaching, got a teaching certificate, that did open a lot of doors for me abroad. I do think that there's some places where you just need to speak English and they'll be like, come teach English. But I do truly believe like just because you can do something doesn't mean you can actually teach it.
I know. Wouldn't know the first thing about teaching somebody English.
And there's something like I know my limitations too. Like, we travel a lot with our kids. Some people are like, why don't you homeschool? You're a teacher. And I'm like, you know what? I know my limits. Like I do really well in a classroom with many kids, but teaching my own kids, like that just sounds like a nightmare to me. Bless all the people that do it. I think they're rock stars and amazing. I just know I would not be a good teacher and mother at the same time. I cannot wear both of those hats at the same time.
Yes, it is a skill set. I always say that about coaching. People are like, "Oh, you're an Olympian. You should be a coach. Like, why aren't you coaching people?" And I'm like, one, don't put me in a box. I have many things that I'm interested in, and so like everybody who does a sport does not go off to coaching. But two, coaching is a skill set. Like you said, teaching is a skill set. Homeschooling is a skill set. And we are all multifaceted in what we are interested in doing and have various skill sets. And so if that's not yours, don't make it like you can't force it to be anybody's thing. So
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. So tell me a little bit more. Now we're finishing up the van. We know we're pregnant. We're still in Germany or
no. So we had traveled all around Europe at this point, and we are now in Bosnia when I feel like, okay, I am probably pregnant. We're in Sarajevo.
Do you know how many countries you've been to in total, like in your life? Like, are you counting or?
I counted pretty recently, and I think it's around 66.
Wow. Okay. A ton. And so now we're in Bosnia.
So now we're in Bosnia. At this point where I can't go back. This is another funny thing. I can't go back to Italy where my husband's headed because that's home for him because I had overstayed because you can only stay 90 days within 180 days or something. And as I was leaving, they were like, ma'am, you've overstayed. This actually happened when I was trying to go from Turkey to Germany on a ferry, and Germany is part of like EU Schengen. And when we went on the ferry and we got to immigration and they like counted my stamps and said, you overstayed by like 10 days and you're lucky that I don't fine you. So they just put like a big X on my passport and wouldn't let me through. So I had to like ride out 90 days. So anyway, so that wasn't an option. We're trying to figure out where we're going next. That Ghana job fell through and we were looking at South America. We had met a bunch of people that were like, we've traveled all over South America. Colombia was just life-changing, just so beautiful. This was way back at the start of 2016, and we're thinking about Colombia. So Blossom goes back to Italy. I fly to the US, and we're just like making plans for our next move. I finally take a pregnancy test. I'm like, okay, definitely pregnant. Then I make an appointment to like do the ultrasound. And that very first appointment was when she was like, did you consider that there might be two in there? And my sister was there with me and she said, I just like went pale and like stopped breathing.
What?
And so the ultrasound tech was like, I mean, it could just be like the image. Sometimes there's like this mirror image that happens. You should really make an appointment with a doctor and confirm. And now looking back, I realize I think she just saw me panic and didn't want to be the one to like sit through my panic. Yes. Because when I look at that ultrasound now, that very first ultrasound image, it's so obvious that there were two.
There's two.
Yeah, there's just like no mistake. It couldn't have been like, mirror image or anything like that. So anyway, that's how I found out. And then Blossom's in Italy at the time. I tell him and he's like super excited, tells his parents. They were, a little less excited. They're more traditional parents. We were like, obviously, unmarried and all that at the time. But then at this point, we're like
bouncing all over the world. They're like, you crazy kids.
Exactly. Like, where are you going to live? All these questions that we hadn't thought about yet. We hadn't, worked in some time. We didn't know what our next job was going to be. But it was right around this time that I was watching like the news late night. It was like Spanish TV, Univision or something. And they were talking about the Zika virus. And it was really bad in Brazil and Colombia. And it was affecting pregnant women. And at this point, we hadn't bought our tickets to Colombia yet, but that was our plan. And so I called Boston and was like, you need to look up the Zika virus. There's this thing going around. And it was really awful. Like, those poor mothers that were going through that on top of, the anxiety that we get in being mothers anyway. So we had to shift our plans. And so we did a bit of research, and the one country in South America that it might not have been the only one, but the one that came up as not having Zika was Chile. And I don't know if that's just like a mosquito population thing or like they're at an altitude or what it was. I didn't look into it, but we're like, okay, let's just go to Chile and we'll ride it out in the meantime. And so we did. But this is like, a testament to how we are as travelers is the tickets to Santiago de Chile were really expensive. So we're like, we'll just choose a neighboring country. We chose Peru, Lima. Those tickets were way less expensive. We're like, we'll just go and we'll bus down. So we get to Lima and we go to a bus station and they're like, yeah, this is the cost of the ticket. It was all very reasonable. And they're like, it's a 56-hour ride. We're like, oh,
56 hours.
They seem really close together.
Pregnant with twins.
So that is how I welcomed second trimester pregnancy, was on a 56-hour bus ride from Lima to Santiago de Chile. And once we got to Chile, I did get a teaching job, and Blossom got a job in a cafe. So we were kind of like getting back on our feet financially. We were like penniless, but we knew that we were going to do this trip around Europe. We knew that we were going to spend a good chunk of our money, and all of that was fine until we were going to have kids. Then like that changed what we had to plan for. And yeah, so we worked, and it was kind of hard because it's a capital city. Things are expensive. We had to share an apartment. We were in a 2-bedroom, 2-bathroom apartment that we shared at first with one person. And then that one person brought somebody else on, and then somebody else. And suddenly we were like sharing the place with 4 men. So I was like, this is not going to work. We're going to need a different plan. And it was really hard to get insurance because I was already pregnant. And so they only had like very pricey private insurance available. Basically, it started to look like we weren't going to be able to make it work. We stayed for 3 months. And then at that point, the decision was, do we go to Italy where there's universal health care? Do we go to the US where I can get on Medicaid? And I decided I would rather be around my sister, my siblings, my family than my in-laws, who are great, but first time mom, you just want to be around your people. And so we did go back to the US and I had the kids there. And after 3 months, we left again. And we were just on the road we stayed in Italy for 3 months. When the kids were 6 months, we made the decision to go back to Dubai, even though we left it and we were like, this door is shut behind us. But at this point, we hadn't had, real stable jobs for a while. And both of us still had connections to our previous employers. And so it seemed like the best next step to kind of get back on our feet.
Okay, so we got to pause for a second because you were in America when you got pregnant in Germany, went back to America, left America, went to Peru, took a 56-hour bus trip, being pregnant with twins, not one, but two kids. Left Peru, went to Chile, left Chile, had the kids in America. And then when the kids were 3 months old, like anybody who's listening to this podcast right now was like, wait, what? And so I just had to wait, what, with them? Because so many people are just like, oh my goodness. Like you said, now that we've gotten together, we need to settle down. Like you mentioned his parents talking about like, what are you guys going to do? How are you going to earn a living? There's this like nature, nurture sort of instinct that everybody talks about. And to your point, you said you had this conversation early on that like you guys didn't want to stop traveling. And you didn't.
Yeah, until they were 3 months, we were in Denver. And then as soon as they were 3 months, like we got the kids 3-month shots and then we were off to Italy.
And then Dubai, right.
And then back to Dubai. So Dubai when they were 6 months. I do want to say, this is really important in my financial story, is we often think of finances and building ourselves up in like such an isolating way, like it's us and our partner, us and our immediate family. But the reason we were able to make this work is because of community. And like we could not have done it without, my parents housing us in their basement, my friends coming together and throwing us a baby shower to give us all the essentials we needed in those first few months. Like we hadn't worked in all this time. I worked for a bit when we were in Chile, but like a lot of people would struggle in that scenario. And we just always felt like we had a safety net. And if it wasn't my side, it would have been my now husband's side. And so I really think like the importance of the people around you, of having people around you, of taking care of each other. Like I would do that, without thinking twice to any of my friends who needed it. And they, did the same to me. And so I think that can be hard in cultures where there is a lot of individuality and isolation, but we both come from cultures that really, just take care of family. My parents always said, like, they always had a hard time understanding how people could be unhoused. Of course, we now know that there's like a lot of factors, not systemic and otherwise, but they're like, where are their family members? Why haven't they taken them in and stuff? Of course, I know it's way more complicated, but like we just always had people to fall back on and who just came to us without us even asking. And that has just been like a beautiful part of our journey and so essential, really. We've lived through now COVID and like all these other hard times. And I think without community, people can really, really struggle emotionally, mentally, financially.
100%. Yeah, I'm glad you brought that point up too. I'll tell my story later. It's not about me today, but definitely you've been a huge part of my community as I figured out like momming in a new country after only being abroad for a year. And yeah, it's just like inevitable, the experience that you bring to any relationship that you're in because of what you've experienced in your life. And like your love is overflowing and it shows. So yeah.
And I just think, we can all just be a little more loving and like just take care of our people and that can go a really long way. Because same, like I've been there. I've been like I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know how to mom. I don't know how to parent. And like just, the way people just show up at your door is so beautiful.
So let's talk a little bit more. Like the twins are here now and you all have continued to travel. They are 9 years old, right? Like, what is your philosophy in how you want your children to be raised? Like, you're not currently living in America. You didn't create the kind of, you said, American dream, stable environment, live in a home, only go to one school. I know, like, a lot of the stereotypes or the language or the messaging around get your kids into the best school, get them in the best, neighborhood, move to the suburbs. There's a lot of just like a pressure on us to create, this quote unquote better life for our children. And I feel like it's come with specific messaging, but you're completely outside of that box. And so talk a little bit about like your philosophy of like how you want to raise your children and how you're organizing your finances to be able to continue to show them the life that you want to build for them.
Yeah, so I touched on this a little bit before, but it's really the idea of travel and living in a different place is really valuable to us, our kids, because I speak English to them. My husband speaks Italian to them. They speak Spanish here. They've kind of grown up already into this like multilingual way of living, which I think is really valuable and like hard to replicate unless you are living in a different country. I think we are giving them such great lives. I don't know if they know that. And I don't know if like in the future, they're going to tell their therapist that they had great lives. But it's just been really nice because their education is like their everyday surroundings. It's like going outside and just, seeing how people live their lives and in ways that are different. I think it's building empathy in them. I think it's building resilience, the ability to adapt. And it's not like we're roughing it. Like we live a great life, a great, comfortable life here. They do go to a really good school. But to me, like all of that was less important than just learning through the world and learning through the people around them and the experiences that they have and just not being sheltered in that like suburban life. I know that my parents gave us that because that was the best thing they could offer for us at the time. And for them, they needed that kind of stability. But because I was able to have the privilege of that, I'm able to give my kids, what I think is the best, most adventurous life. And I think we'll just keep going. Like we're in Colombia now. We'll probably be here for another, 1 or 2 years. My sister's moving here now with her family. And in a couple of years, yeah, we'll look at someplace else that they can experience another language that they can learn. And to me, yeah, that's really important. And that will continue to be important. As far as like setting up finances to make it possible, when we left Dubai, so we took the kids to Dubai when they were 6 months and both Bossum and I worked. Both of us worked full time there. The kids went to a daycare and we went to Dubai knowing like we didn't love it the first time, but we have to be here. And now maybe our goals should not be like, let's earn a bunch and then spend it all traveling, but like set up a bit of a nest now that we have kids. So we got to be a bit more responsible. So we pulled out the Excel spreadsheet and like made a plan. Here's our expenses. Here's our income. How much do we want to save? How long is that going to take us to save? And we broke all that down. And we did it. We like saved exactly to the amount we wanted. We left with that money at the point that we expected to. The only difference is that it was COVID time. And my sister was supposed to get married that March 2020. There were like a lot of trips that we were going to take to visit certain people. We didn't get to do a lot of that because of COVID. And so we decided like some of this money that we saved, which was supposed to set us up for our next life in Colombia, let's spend some of it to go see people. So we bought an RV. We traveled around the US for a year, the US and Canada, and just visited our friends and family all around the country. And that was so beautiful too. I'm really grateful for that experience, but we still left with a good chunk so that when we came to Colombia, I was the only one working and my husband took a break and he was in charge of like house and childcare stuff. It was a, difficult transition, the steep learning curve, I would say, but it has been really good for us. Dubai, there were some days where it was just like survival. And I think a lot of moms can relate in that you can be working full time as much as your partner, but you're still required to do pretty much full time childcare and house duties. And that was heavy for us. It felt like that. As much as we both knew, like, the feminist in me and all that, like it still happened that way. And so we needed kind of a reset. And Colombia allowed us to have that because we could get by comfortably on just my salary. And I got a job that is very flexible. So I'm able to, go to the kids' performances. I can go to their sports competitions and things like that. And I can do a lot of things for myself. So that has been really good too. I do really prioritize that. I'm always out and about on work days. I still get my work done, but I make sure that I am taking care of me as well. And like we're in a position where we can financially, time wise, work wise, and with the kids being a bit older, that's been really good for us. So, the other thing is, with the money that we saved in Dubai, we made sure to invest some of it. So we invest in, ETF, kind of like low risk, investment, some real estate investment. We do like a multifamily syndicate investment. Bossum dabbled in crypto, which is all his department. I wasn't really as much into that, but that, he takes care of that. So, ups and downs there. But we wanted to make sure that if we have any shifts in our employment or anything like that, that we're not scrambling. And, 100% living outside of the US, that has really helped because, I have friends who are solidly middle class, but if they lost their job tomorrow, they would have a really hard time making ends meet pretty quickly. But, with cost of living so different here in Colombia, we know we have a cushion in case of emergency, and we're able to have the disposable income to enjoy our lives in the meantime.
I love it. I love it. I love it. I usually finish up with like this rapid fire questions, which I feel like I'm going to kind of like, what's the word? Adapt my rapid fire a little bit, because as I'm listening to you kind of talk, I know that there's a mom listening that's like, holy cow, she's awesome. But also I don't know where to start. So my first three they're semi rapid fire, answer how, as you see fit. But I have three questions for you as a mom. And then I'm going to do a couple rapid fires and then we're going to shut it down because I can't keep you all day and night, even though I would love to. So I said all that about the mom listening because there's people out there that don't know where to start. They're listening to you and they're like, holy cow, she's been to 66 countries. Her kids speak 3 different languages. They're currently living in a different country. They're not even planning to stay there. What do you say to the mom that is like, this life is cool and maybe I want, to start creating my version of that, but has no idea, like they're just scared?
Yeah, I definitely think first reaching out to a community is really helpful. There are like Facebook groups of varying quality, but there's like a really good expat moms Facebook group for Colombia, for Medellin, for example. There's a WhatsApp group. I would say reach out to that first because there is a lot of information out there of like single people doing this. And you're like, yeah, I can see how single people can do that. But, moving a family feels a lot more challenging. I think you just need one example of a family that's done it to be like, oh, I can do this. Like, what are the things that you considered? I don't know if this is helpful to know, but I am a terrible planner. We came to Colombia knowing nothing about health insurance, knowing nothing about like the school system. We didn't even know that the school schedule was like a January to November schedule. Knew nothing at all. We just came here on a feeling. So, which is to say that like it kind of works itself out. And I always find comfort in like our families that live there. Yes, they're expat families, but they're obviously local families that live there. And if they can make it, then you know that you have everything that you need for your kids to live there. Barring that it's like a war zone, et cetera. But like, you walk outside and you see kids walking around, kids playing around. And so that to me is like, this is a livable place for a family. And many places are livable places for families. So I would say connect with people and then just know that like worst case scenario, you can always leave.
Yeah, I love that too. Like, it's another country, but everybody is procreating worldwide, and other humans are being born and growing and thriving
Exactly.
worldwide. It's not different. I mean, it is different in different places, but the basics are there,
Yeah,
sperm and egg get together, baby gets created, and baby must grow up and be cared for.
100% that. Yeah.
Right. Which to that point, question number two is like, what do you say to the person that's like, kids need stability? Like, what does that even mean to you as far as like kids need stability? How do you respond to that?
Yeah, I think about that a lot. And I think my kids get stability from us and like our home and, having us be there and try to keep up, things like when they come home from school, we welcome them home from school and things like that. And I think they don't need much more than that. I mean, they go to school, they have their after school activities. There is stability. Like saying like, oh, if you live abroad, you're completely unstable. That's not true. Like you do find your stability in the place that you are in, and you find your kids find their friends and they develop those kinds of relationships too. I know that as kids get older, it can be harder to move because they do get, attached to certain friendships, certain things that they get used to. But kids are also just so adaptable and so resilient, and this is good for them. And like I said, if it doesn't work out, then we'll just come back. It'll be fun.
Yeah. I love that. Like, people say like home is where the heart is, or,
Mhm.
there's so many different cliches. It's like the stability is created via the infrastructure that is around them. And you can create a good infrastructure no matter where you are in the world, is what I'm hearing. Yeah. Okay. Last mom question. And then we're going to do like 3 rapid fires and then we're out of here. I swear, people. What do you say to the breadwinning moms? You mentioned, transitioning your life to where Bassem is the head of like the household as far as like running the kid things. And I think that's something else that is still very stereotypical. We're starting to change. More and more, we're finding that women are, the breadwinners for the household. And so, like, we're hearing the term stay-at-home dad a little bit more. But like, what is your messaging to the breadwinning moms?
Just good for you. Good for you for taking that leap because I know it is so hard. I had to let go of like wanting things done a certain way, or like he would make them breakfast or whatever, and I'm like, oh, I wouldn't have done it that way. Those are thoughts in my mind. I just let all of that go now because if you don't let them do it, they just won't. Like there's like this weaponized incompetence that comes out, and so you just kind of have to like remove yourself from that and then be like, I'm just going to let go and let be, and everyone can live more peacefully. It doesn't work right away. Like I said, it's a steep learning curve and you have to redirect sometimes. And I think for us, the hardest thing was like, I don't want to be the manager to like tell you what needs to be done. Like you have to take on that role. And that took us a lot of time to kind of switch that, where I would rather be told, be delegated a task than be the one delegating a task. So I would say, 3.5 years in, there's still some bumps in the road, but it's been a lot better for our relationship and the way our house runs. And having 2 boys, I think it's really good for them to see that their dad can take care of the home as well. So
Yeah, I think it's important, for people in general to start to shed these gender roles that we, like I said, traditionally been brought up with, because it is so damaging, I think, overall, to think like people, men take out the trash, men pump the gas, woman does this, like, why can't it just be like, this is my role as a member of my family. This is what I do with pleasure for my family, whether it is taking out the trash or pumping the gas or whatever it is. But like to put on it, I have to do it because I am this gender versus because like, this is my role within the infrastructure in our family. And this is the way that it works best for us. Like, I just think changing the language that we use, even if the tasks, still fall in similar buckets as they've traditionally fell, is an important piece of the puzzle. And I'm challenging myself in this like period of my life to start thinking about like, how I talk, because what you say, your kids are listening to everything. They're sponges. And it's really, really important, how I internalize that, but also that to know that they're hearing and they're understanding based on what I'm saying in my household. So
totally. I think about when we were like in the deep of it and we were, arguing all the time, where I felt like I was doing everything and he was not or not noticing things that needed to be done. He was like, I help out a lot. And I was like, the fact that you're saying help tells me that it's my job and you're assisting me in doing my job. And that is not what it is. So it's like really just change it. Like you said, language matters so much. I don't feel like I need help or I'm getting help. It's like, this is your role too, like this is your household too. These are your children too. And so just really switching that mindset.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. Okay, let's wrap this up with just a couple rapid fire questions. So give me what you got. Your best money habit.
Oh, doing my expenses monthly, seeing where my money is going at the end of every month.
Ooh, that's a good one. I fell off the wagon when I had the baby and I'm playing catch up right now and I hate it. Like I never want to be behind again.
If I'm like 3 months behind, I'm like, I'm just going to start fresh.
Exactly. Dying. Okay. You've got $20 in your pocket right now. What do you spend it on?
Dessert.
Ooh, yes. I love desserts. The worst money advice that you've ever received.
Ooh. Okay. This is a complicated one, but like to put all your money in just a savings account and that's it.
Yeah, I'd say that's pretty bad advice. Yeah, it's all in one place. It can't grow or keep up with inflation.
Not growing. It's not keeping up with inflation. Exactly. That's exactly it. Yeah. That's a common one though. Like, because you feel like you're saving, but.
It's similar to stuffing money in your mattress. It comes from different time frames of living and being and, depending on what you were taught culturally. But okay. Something you do for fun that doesn't cost anything.
Spend time with friends. A lot of things actually. Play tennis. Tennis is a free activity here.
Make Lauryn not throw away, but donate things that she doesn't need in her life anymore.
I just value so much time with people. So whatever that looks like, if we're like out having a meal, if we are purging things in your suitcases, like to me, that is connection. And that's like joy for me. That's where I find joy.
I love it. All right. Last question. Can you share with us one thing about your personal finances that you would like to improve in the upcoming year?
I think lifestyle creep is very real. And so Blossom was like primary head of household and stuff. And then he like recently got a job, part-time recruiting stuff. So there's like a bit more money coming in. And I feel like when I do our expenses every month, this extra money should just be extra, but it seems like we are spending it. So I would like to improve on just sticking to our budget and budgeting as if we had, X amount of money and not the X plus Y amount of money. So we can put that away.
Okay. So what is the action item to actually make sure that happens? How can we hold you accountable? Say it out loud here. How you're going to make sure that you stop creeping.
I am going to screenshot my spreadsheet at the end of the month so you can see where I've overspent and then like the next month be like, hey, did you do this again with your restaurant spending?
Right. This is not where we're supposed to be.
Yeah.
Okay. Fair enough. You guys heard it here. What's going to happen? Linda, thank you so much for coming on the show today. Maybe we could just wrap up with you sharing with everybody where they can find you, how they can support you. If there's anything that you need from the people that are out there listening, go ahead and this is your time to kind of stand on the podium, shine, shout yourself out, and let us know how we can help you continue to be awesome.
Oh, thank you for having me. This was really fun. I am like not really on socials or anything, but I work for a popcorn company. So if you support opalpop.com, that eventually gets to me. But other than that, no, like come visit us in Beijing. And you know what? You can email me if you have any questions on how to move abroad, how you do it with kids. linda.tay@gmail.com is a good way to reach me.
Interesting. She is not on social. I didn't even know that you weren't. Like, I guess I haven't looked to find you like semi-exist.
I mean, I kind of am. Like I have an account, but it's like, you just won't see me participating in much.
Right. So someone can also DM you, maybe. Like, you're not trying to get followers, but...
Yeah. Okay, you know what? Yeah, you're not going to get any information from my Instagram. It's real boring, but I am at Miss Linda Tay, MISSLINDATE. You can DM me there too.
Yes. If you think she's as awesome as I think she is, then DM her and tell her she's awesome. or ask her some questions about Medellin or living around the world, whatever you want. But yeah, we just want to make sure that you have the opportunity to let us, like you said, buy popcorn. What is it, MissOpal.com?
It's Opal Pop, OPOPOP.com.
Opal. Okay. We're going to put that in the show notes. We're just going to
Opal Pop, yeah. I mean, I just do marketing for them if you're interested in popcorn.
But I mean, as a closing point, this is like, we always talk about like spending with purpose. Like by putting your dollars in this particular place, like you said, the money, the business continues to run and the people are continue to get their paycheck. And we sometimes take for granted that like those little pieces of the puzzle like do trickle down, and like that is being purposeful with your spending. So yeah, I'm going to buy some popcorn.
I'll send some to you.
All right, Linda, thanks for being on the show today.
Thanks, Lauren. Talk to you soon.